Well, I usually wait like for 10 seconds. I think after 10 seconds, it starts becoming awkward. So yeah, okay.
Thank you anyway. Thank you.
Thank you so much for this great presentation, Jonas, and thank you for coming here and for your contribution. So with that, I would like to move on to our second speaker, Adam Zweber, if I'm pronouncing it correctly, and he is from Stanford University, the United States, and his talk is titled "Artificial Intelligence and Moral Growth." Welcome. Thank you. You can take it away.
All right. Thank you. And thanks to all our organizers and the previous speakers. I've learned a ton from the conference so far. 1 second. Let me find the share screen button.
Well, that's the first time I see a pet in the background.
Oh, yeah. Oh, here we are. Okay, so I'm going to talk about artificial ethical assistance and moral growth. So here's the central question of this talk. Could AI help us make better ethical decisions? And if it could, should we use it in this way? So there are already apps that purport to help you make better ethical decisions. The Humane Eating Project is an example of one. The Allen Institute has produced Delphi, which is an AI that you can ask moral questions, and it gives you answers based off of survey data. The answers aren't clearly always right, so I asked it, am I morally obligated to donate more than 10% of my income to charity? As most of us know, some people will argue, yes, definitely. Delphi says it's discretionary. But one can see that the technology is progressing in a way that indicates, well, maybe it will start getting these, giving us pretty good or compelling, at least, answers to moral questions pretty soon. Okay, so the use of AI to help us make better ethical decisions is referred to in the literature as moral enhancement. So I want to focus on a specific kind of moral enhancement for this talk. I want to focus on whether we could use AI to aid us in making better ethical decisions on the spot. So I'm thinking if you have a decision to make within the time frame of, say, minutes to days, could AI help you? There's another potential use of it in moral education to form our characters. This I want to set aside for today and just focus on short-term uses of AI. So there are several proposals in the literature for how to use AI for moral enhancement in this way. I'll talk about each of these in turn through the talk. So here's the plan. I want to start by discussing one fairly prominent proposal for what's called an artificial ethical assistant. I then want to present 2 reasons to think that widespread and personal use of this artificial ethical assistant would likely be detrimental to users' moral growth. And I'm only going to focus on this widespread personal use. So this technology could be useful in, say, medical decision-making, and I don't think that my objections would apply to these rather circumscribed uses. And if I have time, I'll talk about a way to potentially improve the technology to overcome the objections that I'll raise. All right, so first part of the talk, personalized artificial ethical assistants. What are they? So here's one thought that you might have. Maybe there are objective moral truths that exist independently of us humans. Maybe you could make an AI that was better able to grasp these objective moral truths. Some people have thought so. So one proposal for this is, well, if you could make an AI that was able to do this, and you're faced with a moral dilemma, well, that AI would be in a better position to know the moral truth. So it would likely give you be more likely to give you the correct answer to that moral dilemma. An extreme version of this proposal says that, okay, well, let's build an AI like this and let us humans exit stage left, leaving behind a planet populated with robots that, while not perfect angels, will nevertheless be a vast improvement over us. So this proposal clearly relies on some pretty heavyweight assumptions about how ethics works. Why would AI be better able to grasp somehow objectively existing moral truths? So I want to set this proposal aside and instead use it as motivation to think about, well, is there another way in which we could build an AI that would help us make better ethical decisions without these pretty heavy assumptions? So this leads us to a proposal from Giablini and Savulescu about a proposal that I'll call personalized artificial ethical assistance. So these AEAs are trained on data that is indicative of a user's values. So maybe the user would answer survey questions. Maybe the AI could be trained on answers from those close to the user. The AI could use data from the user's behaviors to determine, okay, well, what are the user's deepest values? The AI could then provide recommendations about what to do in light of these values. So often we're hungry, we have all kinds of cognitive biases, we get tired. It's been shown that humans make different moral decisions depending on all of these factors. So we're not always going to make decisions in light of our deepest values. This technology could then tell us, well, okay, what would we decide if we were consistent, clear-headed, well-informed, maybe had a full stomach, and had all the time to think through the implications of our decisions? So this would be a way of getting rid of some of the biases and flaws in our reasoning and figuring out, okay, what would we really want to do according to our deepest values? This technology could also, as the proposal goes, have more empirical information about the consequences of our decisions. Okay, so as an example, suppose you're going out to eat, you don't know whether to choose the vegan option or some delicious meat option. There are all kinds of factors. You might be super hungry and probably not reasoning well. That might tempt you into choosing the more filling looking option. This technology could say, look, according to your deepest values, and according to what we know about this restaurant's practices, you should choose the vegan option. Or it could recommend not choosing the vegan option if that's what your deepest values recommend. Okay. So this technology has a number of motivations. We don't need to figure out which values the AI should base its recommendations off of. So if we wanted to build an AI that recommends what to do, one could imagine a bunch of, let's say, utilitarians building such an AI and then always giving utilitarian recommendations. Well, it's not obvious that utilitarianism is true. So it's not obvious that that technology would really be that beneficial. These personalized AEAs, on the other hand, rely merely on the user's values, so you don't need to decide prior to the use of technology which values it will recommend. The AEA is also motivated by meta-ethical positions. So it's Giablini and Savulescu based their proposal on an influential account of morality, according to which the moral truths are just those that would be endorsed by someone who didn't have flaws in their reasoning and had all the empirical information. There is a worry that, well, if you start with bad inputs, if you're a horrible person and you use this kind of thing, you're not going to make better decisions. But there seems to be a decent reply to this, which is just to say, well, the intended users are just those of us who are minimally decent in trying to be better, trying to be more consistent with our own deepest held values. All right, so that's part one. Discuss a prominent proposed personalized artificial ethical assistant. And I want to present two reasons to think that this kind of technology would be detrimental to our moral growth. So Henry David Thoreau writes, how could youths better learn to live than by at once trying the experiment of living? And I think that captures roughly my thought. This kind of technology would, I think, affect our experiments of living in potentially negative ways. So here are the two reasons that I have for thinking this. First, these artificial ethical assistants would provide conservative answers in the face of something called transformative choices, which I'll explain in a minute. And these transformative choices often help us grow morally. My second worry is that, well, this technology would likely change how we view our actions in retrospect if they were made on the basis of the recommendation of an AEA. So I want to explain this first reason in some more detail. So think about a choice that you've made that fundamentally changed who you were. Examples could be deciding whether to become a parent or go to grad school, whether to join the military or date a particular person. In light of these choices, depending on which option we choose, we'll end up with very different values. The person that we are after going through with the choice is often a very different person than the person we were when we made the choice. So what would an artificial ethical assistant have told you to do in one of these scenarios? Well, it would have told you to go with the choice that aligns with your current values, which aren't necessarily the ones that you'll end up with after the choice. So it's unclear how we should make sense of their advice in these situations. They are basing their advice off of your present values, but your values are going to change. So as I'll argue, these AEAs would make us less likely to choose the option that our future self would endorse, rather than what our past self would endorse. All right, so let's introduce some terminology so that we can get the argument more clear. A transformative experience, these experiences have received a lot of attention in philosophy lately. L.A. Paul describes them in detail in her book, which is just called Transformative Experience. So they have two aspects, according to Paul. They're epistemically transformative, and that they are the kind of experience that teaches you something you couldn't have learned without having that kind of experience. So the paradigmatic example is seeing red for the first time. When you see red for the first time, arguably, you learn something that you couldn't have learned without having that experience. Transformative experiences are also personally transformative when they're the sorts of experiences that can change who you are in the sense of radically changing your point of view rather than only slightly modifying your preferences. So the examples of experiences that I listed previously, like becoming a parent or going to war, are paradigmatic examples of personally transformative experiences. A transformative experience is then something that has both of these features. It's both epistemically and personally transformative. And a transformative choice, as I'll use the term, is a choice whether to have a transformative experience. So now that we have these concepts on the table, let's think about AEAs in a little more detail. So suppose, to take an example of Paul's, you were deciding whether to become a vampire. And let's suppose that a modern vampire feeds on the blood of livestock and it's nocturnal and immortal. So you're not like killing people or feeding on their blood like a traditional vampire would be. Now that kind of lifestyle might not sound very appealing to you. But suppose that your friends said, yeah, you know, it didn't sound appealing to us, but we became vampires and we love it. It's amazing. Well, from the point of view of your current self, becoming a vampire isn't really what you should do. So an artificial ethical assistant would recommend not becoming a vampire. But if you did become a vampire, you might be like your friends. You might say, well, that was the right choice. I'm so glad that I became a vampire. So it's very unclear whether an artificial ethical assistant of the kind proposed by Giablini and Savulescu would give you the correct answer here. And more importantly, if it's always going to tell you what to do from the point of view of your current self, it's not going to lead you to make these decisions based off of the values of your future self, but these decisions often lead us to grow morally. So to sum up, AEAs will recommend what to do on the basis of your current values, but transformative experiences change your values. So they won't give you recommendations in line with your future values. And moreover, because transformative experiences are epistemically transformative, it's unclear that you even could, in principle, provide an AI with the relevant data to give you a better informed choice for what to do. Okay, so that's my initial worry about these AEAs. So in summary, personalized AEAs necessarily provide these conservative answers in the face of transformative choices, but the non-conservative answers often provide the impetus for moral growth. I think that people who go to war or become parents would find that they did learn something important about morality or ethics through those experiences. So therefore, widespread use of these, I think would likely inhibit our moral growth. All right. Real quickly, because I think my time is rather short, I'll talk about my second worry, and then we can discuss the rest in the Q&A if we want or not. So use of this technology, I think, would potentially negatively affect the results of experiments of living. So suppose you're trying to find the right balance between your professional and your familial duties. Suppose you're trying to decide whether to take an important meeting or to go to your child's recital. Well, we can imagine that you choose the important meeting and regret it. And that would teach you something important about the value of your family versus your career. But suppose that you made the same decision on the recommendation of an AEA. Well, now it's unclear how your post hoc reaction would change. It's unclear whether your regret would be the same. There have been some studies that show that regrets actually increased by when you're just following orders and you make the wrong choice. There have been studies that have indicated the opposite. I'm not a psychologist, so I'm not exactly certain what to make of those studies, but I think it's plausible that your pride, your guilt, your regret would be affected by the fact that you made this choice on the basis of the recommendation of an AI rather than simply on your own reasoning. But our pride, our guilt, our regret, our satisfaction with our choices often is an impetus for moral growth. It teaches us, well, did we really make the right choice? And it'll affect what choices we make in the future. So these AEAs would affect those, would likely affect our post hoc reactions. Our post hoc reactions are a significant factor in our moral growth. So it's at least a serious possibility that these AEAs could negatively affect our moral growth. And I think that's about 20 minutes. So I guess I should end here and see if there are any questions.
Thank you so much for this excellent presentation. It was very interesting to me because I got the chance to read Lori Pohl's Transformative Experience. I got the chance to read some of the other articles that you referred to, and I have some questions, but I want to give it to the audience first. So please go ahead, Dane. I hope that's correct.
Yeah, that's right. Hi, thanks. I enjoyed the talk a lot. I've been thinking a lot about these moral advisors, particularly Sablaska's and Giuliani's article, which I just read recently. Mm-hmm. But so the one they propose, I do agree that, I mean, your objections definitely resonate with me, but I wonder if, that's not the only kind of AEA, AMA that we could imagine. So I'm wondering, based on your particular worries, if rather than being skeptical about the possibility or the goodness of an AEA, if it could be the basis for sort of a modified version of the one they offer, and if you could hedge against in particular the particular risks that you identify. I wonder if you thought about that, if you've come up with the version yourself.
Yeah, thank you. So yeah, I want to be clear. I was only really like targeting the version from their 2018 paper. I don't think these objections apply to like every possible AEA or moral advisor, however you want to put it. So I'm not sure if you're familiar with like Lara and Decker's. They have this Socratic AEA, they call it, where it would be an AI that's basically a version of Socrates. It just asks you questions and engages you in a dialogue. about the decision that you're going to make, and kind of forces you to do some more reasoning yourself about it. So I don't think of this kind of version would face the same worry, and I think something like that could be potentially very useful, because it's one of the motivations that Laura and Decker point out for having this kind of technology is that, well, it would make you question your values and make you think harder. And so presumably that wouldn't favor the conservative answer in the face of transformative choices or not. So yeah, I think something like that could be very helpful.
Do we have time for a brief follow-up, or do you want to move on, Zulfa?
Sure. I don't see any other hands, so please go ahead.
Okay, well, I want to leave you time for yours as well. Okay, good. That's really helpful. I wonder, part of another problem that you may have thought of as well, but I'm not sure you touched on today, that I see with these advisors, even maybe the Socratic kind, is that so our moral priorities are what determine the things that we take to be salient about morally relevant situations.
Yeah.
So in effect, when you have someone intervening on that, so this would be a problem only if your idea of autonomy is super individualistic. I think this is very much the Western sort of approach to moral responsibility. And it seems that this Western individualistic perspective really cares about moral credit, moral blame, targeted specifically on an individual. So I think that kind of perspective would still take issue even with the Socratic kind of AMA or AEA, because they're somehow trumping your attention, your sort of determined based on your moral values and priorities, selection, choices, moral choices, and in some way, so even if you end up autonomous in your final decision, there's something that's been interfered with during the attention process alone, which weighs into deliberation, and so undermines the agent in some way of their moral credit worthiness, if you will. Now, I don't really buy into that highly individualistic conception of autonomy and moral responsibility, but that would just be one thing that I sort of more of a comment. Sorry, that went on too long.
So I'm curious, you think this, even the Socratic one would undermine a kind of autonomy? So I would think the way I was thinking about the Socratic one is, oh, it's just like talking through the problem with your friend. And I wouldn't think that you would lose some kind of like credit worthiness for your action if you just talked through it with a friend. Or
yeah, no, I agree. I mean, on a basic, quick, intuitive level, that seems innocent enough.
Yeah.
But it's kind of like, yeah, if only the murdering husband, when he came upon his cheating wife, had a friend by his side who could have said, stop what you're doing and, think about it, calm down, throw some cold water over his head or something like that. I mean, yeah, I mean, this is the kind of society I'd like to live in, where we're all invested in one another's moral existence, and we try to help. And in the end, you could say the decision is still yours. Then you have to think about nudging and whether that undermines something. But anyway, I agree with you that the Socratic version doesn't seem to be it just triggered my reminder of the extreme sort of obsession with the rugged individualistic approach to credit. Yeah.
Sure.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you for your thoughts.
Thank you. That was super helpful.
Thank you so much, Dane. Are there any other questions or comments? Any kind of feedback? If not, I'm going to go ahead, if you don't mind. So let me see if I can articulate my question in the best way. So I think it's related to what Dane said, actually. So I was thinking about this, I think what is called the responsibility gap when you're using these AI technologies, like how much they contribute to your decision at the end, and how much you yourself contribute to the decision, and like offloading the kind of responsibility on the AI or ethical advisor. Is it a good idea or not? These kind of questions came to my mind, and related to that, I was actually thinking about, if I didn't misunderstand, you said that or somebody said, one of the papers that you were referring to, that the ethical advisors would take into consideration your past values rather than your future values. Along those lines. So I was just thinking, if you weren't asking the question to the ethical advisor, but you were making the choice yourself, wouldn't you also be looking at your past? Because that's the kind of the information that you have. So because you cannot, and I think this kind of relates to Laurie Pohl's idea of transformative experience as well. So you have become a different person when you're in that experience, and you cannot really put yourself in your future self's shoes when you're not at that point. So yeah, I mean, I don't know if I was clear about my questions, but wouldn't you be also taking your past values and maybe your current values into consideration more than your future values, which you can't probably reliably predict at all times?
Yeah, that's fantastic. So the way I understand a transformative choice is, well, you're going to have different values after you make the decision. And it's not obvious that you should be guided entirely by your present values. But I mean, I would imagine, it's probably impossible to make a decision without taking into account some of your present values. How else would you make a decision? But the concern with the AEAs, as described by Giabolini and Savulescu, is that they would only operate on your past and present values. So they would be they're systematically going to tell you to do the option that would be endorsed by your present self rather than your future self. But it's not clear that that's what we should be doing in these situations. Sometimes it seems like, oh, well, maybe you should be doing the thing that would be endorsed by your future self and not endorsed by your present self, given that you know that your future self is going to endorse them. So yeah, I'm not sure if that answers your question.
Yeah, thank you so much. No, that's all right. I think we're at the end of the session. I can write to you if I have more questions later, because I think I can find your information online somehow. But thank you so much for this great presentation. Again, it was very interesting to me, and I like the way that you used the literature on transformative experience and moral growth that I haven't read anywhere else.
Oh, cool. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Please,